Hey everyone, this is Ole Sharanki from Laddering Your Success, and you're listening to the LYS podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to Edge of Steps in Person 2025. This is our first in-person podcast for the year. We're super excited for our guest today, and we're back and we're fresh. And Festus, it's good to be back with you.
It's good to be back with you, man. 2024 was an amazing year. Felt like a lot of roller coaster happening, but 2025 is looking good. I mean, I'm starting to learn you got to enjoy the roller coasters. You got to the ups and the downs. But yeah, let's get right into this.
All right, let me take a couple seconds and introduce our guest, our first guest for the year. Jeffrey Alan Peck, a Houston native and great-grandson of the legendary Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, carries forward his ancestors' legacy with remarkable dedication. A professional motorcycle drag racer turned advocate, Jeffrey has become a prominent spokesperson for racial justice and social equity. He is actively involved in initiatives like the W.E.B. Du Bois Center in Ghana and travels nationwide performing as Dr. Du Bois in the play Justice on Trial. Honored with President Biden's Lifetime Achievement Award, Jeffrey's work bridges history, education, and empowerment for future generations. Laddering Your Success is very honored to introduce and welcome our first guest for the year 2025, Jeffrey Alan Peck. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being here with us.
Yes, it is a pleasure to be here with you, gentlemen. I've watched from afar of what you've been doing, and I'm very proud of what you've done. And when I went to New York and we had the event there, I realized that there are a lot of groups that partner with you that have the same goals in mind, and myself, I have same goals in mind. I think in this day and time, it's important that groups like LYS and SAID and, the Du Bois Legacy Foundation, groups like that work together, because we're definitely stronger when we work together.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's interesting because the whole point of working together, collaborating, it's almost like putting together a puzzle, and, each piece is kind of misshaped and kind of like, I don't know quite how this fits. But once things start coming together, you start seeing the image, and it's interesting because when we met 2 years, it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, Ole and I were just talking about Black history, African-American history, because obviously from George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, we're, at least for me, I can't really speak for Ole, he can speak for himself, but we're really trying to put together the puzzle piece of like, what happened after civil rights to get where we are today? Because it's like, and no offense to anybody, because again, there's those different misshaped pieces that come together. It's like, okay, are we marching? We're saying more rights. We're saying all of these things, and if we don't understand where we are in that story or journey or picture, sometimes it's like, we could be doing the wrong thing. And so the interesting thing, when we met, I had just finished the audiobook, The Souls of Black Folk. And so I think I finished it maybe a month before, which had my head spinning with all these different questions. And it was like, he could have been talking about today. It's like, hey, we after civil rights, we kind of just the ball just kind of dropped. It was like, okay, freedom, equal rights, we could vote, but to us, because of our Nigerian heritage, was looking back and saying, well, the same time that African Americans got the right to vote was about the same time that Africans started to decolonize, and so we're seeing all of this stuff happening. And so it brings me to this point about education, right? Tell us about your personal journey of education. Obviously being Du Bois' great-grandson, great-grandson is like Du Bois. Okay. I think it's one of those things that's interesting is like people would expect, it's just like it just comes down into your head. Or what was that like? Like, were there special schools for you? Or you like a normal person? Or like, tell us about your education journey.
My parents divorced, so Du Bois' granddaughter is my mother.
And
I stayed with her for a short while. Then my father went to court and in custody of me.
Wow.
And, the First question I get all the time: what are you doing in Houston?
Yeah.
Crazy enough, my parents got married in New York, which is where Du Bois was. And my mother said that the crime rate was climbing, the drugs and the gangs were getting bad. And so I had a brother that was 4 years older than I am, and he was born in New York, and then they moved here. I mean, they moved to Colorado, where I was born.
Okay.
And so the whole thing was to get away from all that and go somewhere where education was better and the lifestyle was better. But we ended up in a neighborhood that was all white.
Oh, wow.
The only black family in that neighborhood. My brother and my sister ended up staying there, and then I came to Houston. So my father ended up getting a job at Houston Independent School District. He was over their electronics department. He had some pull in where he could put us. And so there was a school called Will Rogers at that time that was the first magnet school in Houston.
Yeah.
And it sat right next door to the Houston Independent School District main, their big administration building, and it was on Richmond.
Yeah.
And so my dad saw to it that we went to this particular school because it was a magnet school. It was the first, and they offered things that other schools didn't offer. So they had to bus us over there from where we were living at that time. The one thing that sticks out in my memory is we had a black principal. This was like 1970, somewhere in that area. And that was kind of unheard of in a school district of that size, and especially in a school that was right next door to the administration building, and it was a special school.
Yeah.
And so my father and this principal were very good friends. And so that's another reason why we ended up there. I remember at that time, my best friend was a European young lady, or of European descent, and we didn't have a clue that we were different. We weren't being taught that we were different either.
Yeah.
My parents made it a point not to put any stress on that we were black or that we were originally from Africa or anything. We just kind of was kids, and we were learning. We were finding out the importance of being able to read and spell and write, and, But this particular magnet school, I remember we were on TV. Channel 13 came to the school to interview our teachers. And so I was standing there next to the teacher while they were interviewing her, and there was an ant bed, and it was kind of disrupted, and they were starting to crawl on her foot. And she said, "Not now, young man."
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell her. When she found out.
Yeah.
I don't know why that sticks with me to this day. But. So in the very beginning, my father was trying to put us in schools where we were in a diverse atmosphere, different than we realized.
Yeah.
But we didn't know what was going on. We were going through a test to see how we would all get together, and it went well. But then it come to a point where it was just too far to keep, buses
driving
back and forth.
Yeah.
My father was having trouble getting. So we ended up moving to the schools that were closest to the house. And I remember Durkee was the first school I went to. It was a predominantly white school. And we got along well. They taught us well. Things seemed to go well until the movie Roots came out.
Oh, wow.
And when the movie Roots came out, then it kind of took the sheets off of what had happened in the past. And that's where a lot of fighting, a lot of hate started, a lot of anger was involved. And then we had to sit down and have this talk about our history. And at some point, we ended up going all black schools, and that was the following year. In 78, I want to say, started going all black schools. So I'd had a little bit of taste of each atmosphere or environment, if you want to call it. And I realized that there were pros and cons, but the biggest pro is that when you're at schools where the teachers know where you're headed and they know what you're about to get into, they prepare you for that. Whereas when you're at schools where they haven't dealt with that because that's not their circumstance, you're treated, a little bit differently, and you're not prepared for the things that are about to happen because they don't really know what you're about to go through because they haven't dealt with it.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing that sticks out in my mind in my education, is that in going through all these different phases and different environments, the environment that I ended up in Northeast Houston, in an area where people like Mickey Leland and Barbara Jordan were appreciated and active, we begin to see that our parents had gone through some really tough times that we didn't know about, and now we were being prepared to face something similar, but it was getting better. It wasn't quite as bad, but it was a circumstance that if you're not ready for it, you'll be culture shocked. Showing up on time. I think sports instilled a lot of the qualities of dealing with life in general into all of us.
Yeah.
We prayed together. You showed up on time. You worked hard. Sometimes you stayed afterwards. If you made mistakes in games, you ran laps.
Yeah.
And all of this was lessons to teach you about what's about to happen to you. We had no clue. All we knew is, man, I can't wait till I grow up and I can do
Whatever.
this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
I had a child in Great Barrington ask me this question. She said, did you enjoy your childhood more, or are you happier as an adult? Are you glad you finally grew up?
Yeah.
You know? And I said, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to tell you all this right now. Enjoy every minute of someone else paying the bills and putting clothes on your back and feeding you.
100%.
And don't be mad about homework. Don't be upset about cutting the grass, taking out the trash, and washing dishes. All that is great. Because the things that are waiting for you as an adult and the pressure and the stress of bills and the responsibility is far greater of
a challenge.
Issue than being a child and being a kid. So in a nutshell, from there, I went to U of H downtown, and my father said I was struggling with making a decision on what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
You know, like for him, he said, I want to be an electronic technician. He was 8 years old. How do you know that?
Yeah.
He said it just be like tinkering with things, like playing with things. I never really knew what I wanted to be. I knew that he wanted me to be a dentist.
Yeah.
For whatever, you can set your own hours, and it's, your teeth are going to always need.
Indeed, yeah.
So he was seeing this vision of after being an athlete and being active, I just couldn't see putting on a lab coat and being stuck in an office.
Yeah.
So I was searching for this career, which is what a lot of kids out there end up
doing. Yeah.
So I could really relate, and I could tell it's not always easy to figure out. So I changed my major 3 times.
Yeah.
First, it was biology through wanting to be a dentist. Then my dad talked me into trying electronics. Didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I think I was going to be an optometrist. I was really doing well at it. And the teacher that I was under was a black gentleman that was really well known in town for his work in optometry. And he pulled me in his office when I told him I wanted to pull out of the class and do something different. And he said, young man, your future is so promising, and you just get along with people so well, and you have great people skills. That's 90% of it. Then you just learn how to, make contacts and glasses and measure people's eyes. And I was like, just not happy doing it.
Yeah.
He looked me in the face and he said, if this is not your passion, then I understand. But I said, boy, you sure walking away from it.
Yeah.
Hey, LYS fam. It's Ole. Thanks so much for listening to LYS. I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk to the parents. That's right, mom and dad. Parents, prepare your child for their best educational fit after high school with our comprehensive LYS Parents Guidebook. Our helpful guide includes a range of activities designed to help you better understand your child's unique gifts and abilities. Additionally, we provide valuable insights into the student loan debt crisis and offer practical tips on how to avoid accumulating large amounts of debt. Our ebook also includes a wealth of information on scholarships, grants, and payment exemptions that can help guide your child towards a bright and successful future. With our expert guidance, you can rest assured that your child is well prepared to make informed decisions about their education and career path. Don't let your child's future be in jeopardy. Invest in their future today by downloading the LYS Parents Guidebook. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to the show because it's some good topics.
So let me throw in this question because I think you brought up a excellent point of understanding history, kind of like what we talked about in the beginning of like the different puzzle pieces and figuring out where you're at and your context in the greater scheme of things. Moving forward from your education, it sounded like, there's kind of almost a reckoning brewing underneath where some people understood Black history and what had gone on and what had happened. And you were being raised in that immediate generation, of civil rights, where it was like, hey, we just went through, 64 Obviously 64 was kind of one of the bigger years of civil rights. But now you're going into integrated schools, you're going into integrated neighborhoods. Talk to us a little bit about Black history in terms of it being buried, it being kind of not really talked about, but people understanding like, hey, there's a lot there. And if you could kind of bring it forward to today a little bit in terms of like hindsight being 2020, what are some things that you learned, particularly in light of, your great grandfather and some of the work that he's done in different to bring about African American education. Like if you go back and look at that time period, and it's like, how many schools was he a professor at? How many, organizations did he help set up and structure? So if you could kind of talk to us about that a little bit, we'd appreciate it.
As far as why I think we didn't learn as much about, a lot of the states have concentrated on SAT score, where they think you need to concentrate the time, whether it be math or history or English or trigonometry or biology. They saw that a lot of kids in our areas were failing in certain areas, and so they wanted to put more into that so that the test scores would be up so that they would remain getting the funding from the state. And we're in that same fight right now. Du Bois seemed to believe that he wanted to see African Americans get an education, not only to get a job, but to live, And that's one of his famous quotes. Education is not just work, but it's life. And so he saw that as we got educated and we progressed in the field it is that we majored in, that we could help others, and that we as a race could start our own businesses. We could be our own bosses, and we could stand on. So he had this vision. Also, he wanted us to be involved in government because that's where all the decisions are made. But how can you be involved in government if you don't have attorneys, if you don't have people that have the background that would basically qualify them for government? And as I've continued to read on him, I think there's two sides to him. There's a side that wants to see someone of color involved in every aspect of government, from the president on down, judges, attorneys. He wanted to see someone that was able to speak and negotiate change, and not in an argumentative fashion, but in an intelligent, intellectual fashion. And in that way, he saw us holding our own with something to back it up.
Yeah.
So you make an argument with somebody, but you don't have any facts, any meat on the potatoes per se. You don't have anything to stand on. So education put us in a position where we can say, well, wait a minute now, this law states A, B, and C. Y'all say liberty and justice for all. You got all this stuff going on. What about us? And so Du Bois wanted us to be prepared for these arguments, and that's how education prepared us to be part of America as we know it. He had these beginning feelings of, if you go fight for the country, World War I, we fought for the country. They'll see us as patriots. They'll give us the respect that we deserve. So he had to keep evolving and changing his view of what it would take for us to be seen in the light that we needed to be seen in. Wow. And we have done a lot in this country, and I think I've said 1,000 times, without Black history, there would be no American history. The problem is, how do we put Black history in the forefront where people can see it? Where we can take the drapes off of our involvement in building this country.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a little bit about how you came, like after college, as you're working, you're out there, you're doing the 9-to-5 thing, you're working in your career. What kind of, was there a moment or was there something that happened that led you to saying, all right, like I have to preserve my great grandfather's legacy. I have to preserve his love of education and his love of, kind of like you said, making sure there's a Black person at every level, understanding your world around you so you can make a better impact. So talk about that transition, or were you doing it while you were working, kind of doing a little bit of the work? How did you get more involved?
I've been honest about this several times.
Yeah.
There was a point mostly in my life where I was doing the things that made me happy, that I enjoyed, that in a way I was touching kids and interested in drag racing motorcycles. And then I was working as a fireman at one point, and then I kind of crossed over into the chemical industry. There was a whole lot of reasons why I did that, but mainly it was because I enjoyed it. It was intrigued. It intrigued my my intellect. Around about 2014, my brother reached out to me and he said, "We're going to put down a headstone in Great Barrington for our grandmother. Would you like to be involved in it? Would you like to go? Would you like to contribute money?" So I did. All of us contributed. My children and myself contributed money toward this headstone for my grandmother. So I went with him. He was the focal point because he's the older. He's 9 years older, and he was the one that put the whole thing together. So I didn't go to really speak or do anything. But they asked me on a few occasions, "Would you like to say anything?" So I said a few words, and I kind of liked being the guy in the back.
Yeah.
Let my brother take the front. He's earned that. Well, the next year he changed jobs, and he didn't have the vacation. And when you start a new job, they give you 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So he didn't have the vacation just yet to come. So he called. He said, "Hey, would you like to go?" And they called me as well. And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll go. I had the vacation. I've been on my job for 20 plus years. Yeah, I can do it." So I went, and as the years went on, 15, 16, 17, I started going, and my brother wasn't coming. So it was almost like I thought, man,
tag team. Your turn.
So you could kind of step away or what? He says, no, that's not what happened. It just kind of worked out this way. But you're doing a great job. Keep it up. So as I'm taking these trips, I'm seeing my mother, filling her in on what's going on. And she's always been filling my head with stories about things that happened while she was living with Du Bois, because she grew up in the house. And so I thought, I don't know why she's telling me all this stuff. I'm not going to remember it. So I'm jotting some of it down, and she's putting some of it in notes. And she says on many occasions, if someone ever asks this question, and I'm like, who's the someone? Why is anybody going to ask me these questions?
Yeah, wow.
She's preparing me for what she foresays I'm going to be the spokesperson for the family. I never really did a whole lot of public speaking purposely.
Yeah.
It was always an accident. If I won a championship in a class, somebody would stick a mic in my face. And, well, how's it feel? And what, and the adrenaline's flowing. So you just tell them how you feel and what's going on. And for Kawasaki, I go to these events and I get interviewed at the events, and I never thought any of that was going to help me do anything.
Wow.
But it really was preparing me for something way bigger. So I get a call. This gentleman named Jeffrey just says, "Hey, we need you to come to Africa. We need you to speak on behalf of the family at the museum." My brother was just there. Why not? But evidently my brother wasn't able to come. He wasn't answering emails, whatever the case might be. So I did, and I went. And it was between that and my mother passing away, it was almost like the lights came on that this is where I belong. Because I've been praying on this. Like, what do I do next? I'm not racing anymore. And I'm really not. That's not my passion anymore.
Wow.
And from 2014 till they called me in 2022, I was being prepared to take this next step, and now I'm here. And all I can say is there's not one thing that I can point to, but I think the biggest thing was the fact that my mother had put so much time and energy into preparing me and telling me stories and giving me the history of Du Bois. And then to hear from all these professors from all over the world that have so much respect. And you hear them talk about Du Bois, it's almost like they're talking about Jesus in a sense. And so when you see people reverence someone that way, it's hard for you not to say, wow, there must be something to this. And so you start looking into it yourself. And a lot of the stuff that my mom told me is just scraping the surface of what this man has gotten into. When you go to UMass and go up on the 24th floor, whatever floor all his artifacts are on, and you see poems and you see plays that he wrote and books. The books are just wall to wall. Medals that he won for peace. You realize that he is a game-changing individual and that he's put a lot of time and effort into so many different things.
So I want to talk about two pieces of, I guess you could say, evidence or artifacts there. the Phylon and also Farming While Black. It's interesting that, again, as all these kind of puzzle pieces start to fit together, even amongst your own history, kind of connecting, the past to the present, it seems like seeds were being laid. And so if you could kind of talk to us about, your time at Clark, Phylon, and also Farming While Black, and how kind of the seeds of Farming While Black tie into just your overall thought process on how you're tying that legacy together.
I guess it's been about 5 months. I went to Atlanta to unveil a marker that they're putting in front of the Fountain Hall building on Morris Brown's property, which they've coupled with the Clark Atlanta University. And they are wanting to redo the Fountain Hall building. And so I was, really, really happy to hear that. But in the process, I had a chance to go to Clark Atlanta and sit down with them. I had a chance to go to Morehouse and sit down with them. And Du Bois had a different effect on each place. But one of the things that stood out at Clark Atlanta, the president went and got a few Phylon books, and I was like, okay, I've heard of Phylon, and I do remember that Du Bois had something to do with it. And then he opens up the first page and he says the very first person to be the editor, who was the actual guy who started Phylon magazine, was W.E.B. Du Bois in 1940. And I said, I think my mom did say, other than the Crisis magazine, Du Bois started another magazine. So, to know that an ancestor of mine has been so involved in starting things, not so much just being a part of something, but starting is heartwarming. Then, at being at UMass for one of his birthday celebrations, they called in a lady, Leah Pennington, and she began to tell her story about her family, which I do all the time and I'm very proud of. But she was proud of the fact that her family was a group of farmers in Africa initially that could grow anything, anywhere. Limited water, a lot of heat. They had a skill that most people didn't possess. And if you know in history, in America, Indians had issues growing crops. Mexicans had history of issues in growing crops. And of course, the Europeans didn't have a clue. So she talked about how somebody that had been to Africa and knew of this tribe suggested they go get some of these Africans and let them grow the crops here. So she tells a real in-depth story, wrote a book about it, about the heritage of her family being involved in growing crops. In her book, Farming While Black, imagine being the answer to a problem, but you're not even treated like a regular human being. Just imagine that. Or you going and fighting for a country that you're being called names and you're getting, treated and pushed aside and not trained properly. We have been so instrumental in making this country what it is today, but we haven't been given a whole lot of credit. How can you be seen as a seed when you're almost invisible in the light of what this country has become? I think we'll get to the part of the play where I'm in a play, but we'll talk about that. I just think that we have to push to educate people about our past, and we also have to push to maybe have some type of reparations given for the treatment that our forefathers have endured and not been compensated. But that's a conversation. And in Du Bois's write-ups, he says, in having these conversations, you don't go into them angry, you don't go into them forceful, but you go into them with ammunition and research and proof of what happened, and work on trying to come to a resolution that makes sense to everyone, that is fair. But there's just a way about going about this. And I think that's where I am. I'm trying to figure out how we go about this in a fashion that makes sense and really puts us in the right light.
Hey, LYS fam, it's Ole. Just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that even though the cost of college can be daunting, the LYS Scholarship Guide ebook can assist you in realizing your dreams. You can identify and apply for scholarships using the information advice, and resources in our comprehensive guide. Also, we've provided a template for a successful scholarship essay to help you stand out from the crowd. Don't allow student loan debt to control you. Get your copy of the LYS Scholarship Guide ebook right away to take charge of your destiny. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to that fire conversation. So, speaking of Dr. Du Bois's legacy and playing into that, you mentioned the play. So, if you could talk a little bit about how you got into the play, what's involved with the play, and if you can, I really want folks to know about what's happening in Ghana with the Du Bois Museum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after my mother passed away, Bishop James Dixon II asked me to come to the church, and I had joined his church, but he has a podcast, and we did a program for the NAACP there at the church. And he had several, I want to say Sheila Jackson Lee was there, Ron Reynolds, several people from the government for the state of Texas and Houston were there, and we talked about Du Bois and his effect on Black America as we know it, and the things that he wrote about and how much they are so true today. Like we're really seeing a tie, why he's becoming significant. I get a phone call all the time, people saying, man, I was watching TV and they said something about your great-grandfather. So like a lot of people are tying him into what's going on right now, and he's becoming more and more relevant. With that being said, there was a guy that was doing the plays in the audience, Chad Lawson Cooper. So at the end of the deal, he walks up to me and he says, hey, man, I want to talk to you about possibly doing something on your great-grandfather in my play. And I said, okay. He said, have you ever done any acting or anything? No, man, my mother did, and my grandmother did, and my great-grandmother did, but I don't know if the genes pass on, and I just might have something hidden within that would allow me to do it. So one thing led to another. He had me as jury foreman in Justice on Trial. And then one night he called me and he said, Jeff, me and my wife are talking. You're really not a good jury foreman.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, why not sit down and write something on your great-grandfather? We add you to being one of the character witnesses. And at the time they had Harriet Tubman, Emmett Till, and there was another figure that slips my mind, but they replaced him.
I think they have Medgar.
Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers. So they replaced Medgar Evers with W.E.B. Du Bois, and sometimes they'd have all four of us, but the show went on so long with the four witnesses. So at any rate, I sat down, I wrote all the things that I thought stood out, and then next thing you know, I was in the play.
Now you're a playwright.
Pressure because you got to remember all this stuff. You don't have any paperwork. At least when I was jury foreman, I could give you my paperwork. If I missed a line, I know I can go down there and get it. There's nothing to save you in the part I'm in. And I have the longest part of all three witnesses. So that's how I kind of got thrown into doing the play. But it's been an amazing experience because I'm anywhere in the country at any time, and I'm teaching people about Du Bois. And at the end, they make me feel good because they come up to me and they say, man, I felt like I was talking to W.E.B. Du Bois, and he was telling his story like this was today, like yesterday's now. And so that's heartwarming. I had a lady a few shows ago tell me that she's a Du Bois historian. She knows a lot about him. But I didn't know that he went to Germany and that he went to college there. And he fell short on his credits and couldn't graduate there and had to come back. He actually wouldn't have been the first African American to graduate from Harvard if he'd had one more semester over there at the University of Berlin.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's great to be able to share tidbits with people in different places and see their response and how proud they are to know that people like Du Bois paved the way for them. Now, to the museum, that was a moving time for me because I just lost my mother and got over there and was nervous about talking to people that I didn't. And the nervousness left the room when Sheila Jackson Lee walked in. I knew her. And so this one lady, she's in a hurry to introduce me to Sheila Jackson Lee. And Sheila says, no, girl. You're from my city.
Okay.
She said, I'm from her city.
Yeah.
So that right there, and she clapped the loudest, and she hugged me afterwards, and it made it much better. If she hadn't have been there, I don't know how it would. But to be on the grounds where his body, to hear the stories and the people, there's been a few older people that have said, man, my father was friends with your great grandfather, and A, B, and C happened, and they were, they had these discussions about the future.
Wow.
He was like a father to Kwame Nkrumah, and I guess Kwame Nkrumah's thoughts and feelings were influenced. So when I walk through his museum and read his quotes on the wall, it's like I'm reading Du Bois's quotes.
Yeah.
Is that they mirror one. So he had just the effect. He had it, if I could call it that, in how he touched people in that. He believed that Europeans shouldn't be controlling things that don't belong to them. And the people that land and that country belong to should be in control of it.
Yeah.
And so he admired Ethiopia a lot because they had never been reigned by Europeans.
Yeah.
And he wanted the rest of the continent to follow suit.
So yeah, tell us about the wreath laying ceremony and the museum as they're I guess you could say refurbishing it, rebuilding it so it could be more grand. And then you have upcoming trips. So that's, you're sporting a shirt. Tell us about the trips, which we are going to be a part of. LYS is going to be a part of that one way or another. We're going to figure it out. So tell us.
The wreath laying ceremony, there's a few professors that speak in the beginning of it. And then, of course, there's a lady that is the ambassador for the United States to Ghana. She speaks, and she speaks highly of her knowledge of Du Bois and what he means to the relationship between Africa and America. And then different groups lay the wreaths on Du Bois's final resting place. And then, of course, the family goes last. And so I get to lay the wreath last. So it's a real formal, well put together ceremony, and the president of Ghana is present as well. So he's kind of walking back and forth. It gives you a special feeling to know that so many people care that much about somebody that's been gone for this long. 60, 61, going on 62 years. Matter of fact, next month will be 62 years in the past. I don't know, man. It's hard to put into words how I felt about that ceremony, but I can put into words how I feel about them rebuilding his final resting place. And I think when you look at how primitive it is right now, and I've been to Kwame Nkrumah's museum and seen how more modern and how majestic it is. It's a place that sticks in your mind after you've seen it.
Yeah.
Well, people like Lonnie Bunch, if you don't know, he's a secretary over the museum that's in D.C., the African American Museum.
The Smithsonian, yeah.
He's involved in this project, and if you've seen the Smithsonian and how I don't even know how to put it into words. But
breathtaking.
It's just
a
lot. It's a take in. It's not a 1 day deal. It's a 3 day deal.
Yeah.
He wants to see that kind of project being done in Ghana. Now, there's a story that came out a couple of years ago about him in Ghana. And I think, again, you and I have talked about divine right things happening because God has influenced him. Du Bois found out he had prostate cancer. And he needed treatment, and he wanted to come back to the States to get the treatment. And that would have taken him away from Ghana and brought him back here. Well, they wouldn't renew his passport to allow him to come. I didn't know that story. My mother never told me that story, and I don't think many people know that story. Evidently, it was meant for him to stay there and to die there. I think right now we're building a world-class facility over there to bring many of us back home to see things of that nature and to appreciate the people that have affected Pan-Africanism the way they have. If we weren't doing that, there probably wouldn't be as much emphasis on his name, especially over there. And they have the same problem we have. I've seen the kids go, who's W.E.B? I don't know anything about this guy. So they're learning. But that museum is raising that
awareness.
Yes, definitely, that awareness. So I'm very happy that happened. And I think God had a plan, a long-term plan. Once this museum is built, the things that they're going to do in it, like the holograms and his voice being, they're going to have a facility for professors to live in, like dorm rooms. So they're going to influence that those who want to study Du Bois abroad can come there and stay and study his work, and it be a very special experience for them. And there's professors that are preparing this. They're also taking these tour guides and they're bringing them to the U.S. and they're taking them to all these different sites that Du Bois affected and teaching them firsthand about Du Bois. So they're not just talking about stuff from a book standpoint. They've seen it and experienced it.
Yeah.
And I say that there's nothing like experiencing our history up close and personal. Like Cape Coast Castle.
Yeah.
When I saw that, man, there's no movie, there's no book that can give you the feeling of what I experienced there. Even the smell of that place resonates what happened there. So we're trying to create an experience that you can't get from anything else except coming there to see it and understand it. That's how we're going to be able to teach our history, is to experience it up close and personal, because experience takes precedence to everything else.
Yeah, yeah. I think, it's really powerful that, experience, when you think about experience versus, academia and books, it's like you're tying in all the senses. So it's not just learning from reading, it's learning from smelling, it's learning from the touch, it's learning from the way the wind breezes across the Atlantic and things like that. And so it's interesting that, you going from the point of no return to Ghana renaming it the point of return, and then you being a point of return historically and physically, is just amazing to me. You know what I mean? Oh, look at the goosebumps. You got the goosebumps? Okay. Yeah, look at the goosebumps. And so, man, this just ties so much into what we're about at Laddering Success. And so we're just excited to be a part of it, from just, helping you to tell your story, but also hopefully supporting in some more tangible ways of, whether it's logistics and planning, or whether it's actually being there on the ground with you all. We're gonna figure that out. But I think some of the things you said today really tie in what we're about in terms of being, knowing, doing. Being, character, values, and principles, and just what you shared today was how, even though you didn't get a chance to meet him, just his character permeated, your mom, and then your dad, and then those values of education permeated throughout your entire family, you know what I mean? And just living a very principled life, to a point of even saying, hey, I can enjoy myself, but there's much more for me to do. I think sometimes nowadays, kind of everybody's like YOLO, live your life, enjoy yourself. And sometimes we could lose meaning and purpose by just enjoying ourselves, and I think you being able to find meaning and purpose in going to visit Clark, and then going to visit UMass, and then going to visit these places and share what's going on is huge and instrumental. And then knowing, I think that's the thing, is like you went and learned yourself, and now you're sharing what you've learned in middle schools and in high schools, and also internationally, regionally, what resources are available and how to use them. And then finally doing, I think that's the thing, is sometimes we don't do things about the problems that we see in the world. And so you got a plan, you're putting together a process, and you're getting ready to execute. And so we're excited to be a part of that. Ole, you got anything you want to?
If you
Yes.
don't mind,
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
right quick, I do want to have a special mention. I told you my parents divorced when I was young. Well, my father remarried a young lady by the name of Molly Gonzalez Peck. And she's been in my life for 50 years or so of it.
Yeah.
And she did some things that, back then I didn't care for, but I look back and I think were so instrumental in making me who I am today.
Yeah.
You know how in the summer, when you were out of school, you wanted to go out and ride bikes,
Oh, yeah.
and just have fun, go to the pool and swim. Well, my mother, my stepmom, she would buy these pamphlets, the math, social studies,
Yeah.
history. She just bought these different pamphlets, and she would circle pages every day before she went to work and say, "You guys
Do that
this
before I get home, or you get the bell.
She walk out, I think to myself, man, this is summertime, man. I don't
Yeah.
want to be doing schoolwork. I look forward to, getting out of school and that. But she made us do this summer in and summer out, every year. I think about all the other things, just football. They would bring us in and do tour days in the off season, and everything that we wanted to be great at, track and field.
Yeah.
There was Jesse Owen, summer track, or we running
Take
summer
work.
track, but everything we wanted to be good at, we had to keep it going, not
Yeah.
in the regular season, but in the off season of it. And summer was like our off season of school.
Yeah.
So I think she played a big part in me furthering my education. So I just want to give a shout out to her.
Yeah.
I know I spent a lot of time talking about my great grandfather and my maternal mother, but my stepmother has played just as big a part. And she
100%.
deserves the credit. She's had some health issues lately, but she's still alive and she's still kicking and she's still there. And I get to go see her. And I just want to say,
Yeah.
I have to take my hat off to her.
Oh man.
I was talking to someone the other day about the color line,
Mm.
and they made mention that maybe what I'm doing is trying to help erase the color line.
Yeah.
And then I thought, that's really what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm hoping for this invisible line to be there and that all people interact as if they don't see color and they just see a great human being in front of them. And I think that's the way I want to affect the future, and I think that's what Du Bois was striving for.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will get there. You will definitely get there. One of the things I was thinking about when Festus was talking, when he was talking about being no do, was your values, your principles, your characteristics. And he brought up a beautiful point, and that was he was so principled. Dr. Du Bois was so principled. His values were so intact. He was so sure in himself. And, LIS talks about creating this foundation of generational impact or wealth, right? So you learn these things about yourself, you can take it down to your children, and it just goes on. And I think that is probably one of the best examples we've seen of that.
100%.
Me and Festus were having a conversation, and now that definitely does give goosebumps. Is the fact that Dr. Du Bois worked so hard in Ghana, making these things aware. There are so many trips that amazing folks took. I didn't know Malcolm X went to go see it.
100%.
We know he went
there
to
at the museum.
We know he went to Egypt.
Yeah.
We don't know he took a little trip
And
a
Mecca,
little
yeah,
west, and went to Ghana. And to see the vision and to see those values, those principles, those characteristics coming down from generation to you, who is taking that same thing and so the seed has been planted. So you are the young oak, so to speak.
The acorn is already in the branch. Yeah.
That is creating that branch and that stem.
I'm sorry. Can you think about that conversation? The boys and Malcolm X.
No, I am not.
The intellectualness is beneath me, or I'm beneath it. Oh man, yeah. You wanna go and close us out? Man?
Absolutely. Thank you again, Jeffrey Alan Peck, for first guest of the year 2025. I won't lie, it's gonna be a tough one. This is gonna be a great year because this is
it's gonna hard to top this. Like how do we top this? You wanna get the tour dates?
Oh yes. Your tour dates.
When the first tour that we're going to have is August 25th, and it ends on September. It ranges between 1900 to about for 8 days, and it includes all meals except your second through your seventh dinner. The dinner coming and the dinner going, they cover. Breakfast, lunch covered, hotel covered, tour guide covered, gas, pick up from the airport, drop off the airport covered. The things that he's mentioned in the paperwork that isn't covered is your flight there, your visa, immunizations, and any of the things that you want to purchase to bring back. Any of the memorabilia. So I think it's a pretty affordable trip when you look at 8 days.
Yeah.
The flights start out around 900 that I can find. The only problem with the cheaper flights is there's bigger layovers.
Yeah.
And you might end up in London or Paris, somewhere far.
Betty.
And then
that's okay. You can do a little trip, take a little day trip, walk around.
If you want to fly out of DC or New York, it's about 14 to 15 starting, and it's a more direct flight. It's about 14 and a half hours total from Houston to the minute you get. And the flight typically is at night, so you end up being in the normal sleeping mode. They're 6 hours later than we are. So there is a little period of time trying to get used to being over there when to sleep. Like I stayed up all night and I found myself wanting to sleep during the day. So I recommend getting there a little earlier than when you want, but if you can't, it'll be all. But I'll close with this. I am so proud of where we came from and the people that represent us currently that are there and how kind they are. And I have done my share of traveling to other parts of the world. And I can't think of anywhere that I've been that the people are as happy-go-lucky and just happy to be alive and God-fearing and just love people in general than Ghana.
Wow.
They've just been so kind and so nice. And as I've said before, it's not because of who I am, because they don't know. It's not written on my forehead.
Yeah.
I'm just another brother walking in
Yeah.
to Ghana when I walk in until they find out. But beforehand, they leave such a great impression. So if you can, find it in your pennies to put together to go there.
Yeah.
I highly, highly recommend it. I think it's an eye-opening
trip. So definitely we're going to post the information about the trip, how to sign up for the trip. Right now, I think it's just a WhatsApp group. They can connect with Jeffrey directly in the WhatsApp group and also the team that's helped put together the trip. So now.
Absolutely. All right. For Professor Samoya and Olale Sharanki, thank you so much for joining us on this in-person episode of EduSteps. We'll be sure to see you next week. Go ahead and give them the phrase of pace.
So listen, there are legitimate excuses for not going to college. There's no excuse for not getting an education. Listen, if you know somebody who needs to hear this, if you liked it yourself, go ahead and smash the like button and hit the share button with somebody who needs to hear this, because we definitely needed to hear it today. And we're going to see you on the next episode.
Oh, you still there? Well, thank you so much for listening to the LYS podcast.